What's good? My name is Raymond Wu, and today we are going to be talking about Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe through a Marxist lens. In Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe's depiction of Okonkwo's journey as his life progressed shows that despite initial success in social mobility, no matter how hard you try, you will truly never be able to escape your rank in the end. This can ultimately be seen as those optimistic individuals, despite putting an effort to escape your social rank, never succeed, as you would always end up back there. And by there, I mean start in a low class and end in a low class. Social maneuverability and initial optimism towards social and economic increase is a path in which leads to anxiety and despair. So I have three main points to back this up, and my first point being Okonkwo's perspective on his father and his life as a child and how it has influenced Okonkwo as a whole. In the story, it says, Okonkwo ruled his household with a heavy hand. His wives, especially the youngest, lived in perpetual fear of his fiery temper, and so did his little children. But his whole life was dominated by fear, the fear of failure and of weakness. It was the fear of himself, lest he should be found to resemble his father. Even as a little boy, he has resented his father's failures and weaknesses. This shows how, because of his predisposition and how he grew up in a low social class, and how it was essentially at the hands of his father for this, he despises his father and does his best to get in a higher social rank. As a result of hard work and determination, he is now in a dominant class, and this reflects in his aggressive personality. This is an example of how initial success in climbing social ranks is indeed possible, but it is also important to keep in mind that this is in the beginning of the book, and unfortunately, everything goes downhill from here. This is also an example of how, from where Okonkwo started, which was in a subordinate class, that he did indeed start in a lower and social economic class, and he did work up to a higher class. The second point can be seen towards the end of the story, Okonkwo being captured by the white men and held prisoner. In the story, it states, as soon as the 6 men were locked up, court messengers went into Umofia to tell the people that their leaders would not be released. They said, unless you pay the fine immediately, said their headman, we will take your leaders to Umuru before the big white men and hang them. Essentially, this shows how, towards the end of the book, he was treated in such a misdemeanor way, and it was because of his social status and who he was, that he was treated poorly accordingly so. Essentially, since he was a high-ranking official in Umofia, and he was among those at the top of the social hierarchy within the village, that the white men felt it was only appropriate and necessary that Okonkwo and his men were to be put back down and to relegate him to being the powerless one in this situation. It is because of this power dynamic and how his initial climb to dominance has now led him back to where it all began, in a subordinate class. The last point is his unfortunate suicide at the end of the book. In the book it states, then they came to the tree from which Okonkwo's body was dangling and they stopped dead. One of his friends states, that man was one of the greatest men in Umofia. You drove him to kill himself, and now he will be buried like a dog. He cannot say any more. He trembled and choked his words. Essentially, this shows how Okonkwo's life's path and his idea to move from a low to high social class ultimately leads to his commitment of suicide due to his inability to cope with the surroundings. With power and rising social mobility, Okonkwo reached an individual of great status. However, it is because of this status in which leads to his eventual downfall, not only in social ranking, but in life as well. Okonkwo unfortunately met a meek end, one filled with sorrow, despair, and, well, obviously, death. And not only did this ultimately destroy his life fill of negative connotation and events and thoughts, but also filled the lives of those around him in despair, as seen with the statement from Okonkwo's friend, and with the obvious mourning with his friends and family. To close, Things Fall Apart shows how the idea of social maneuverability really just provides a false of hope towards individuals in lower classes. This can ultimately be seen as those, despite putting an effort to escape your social rank, you would always end up back there, especially with Okonkwo's situation as a child in comparison to a situation at the end of the book. Now, if you spaced out for the entire time I was talking, the one thing I want you to remember is when you're looking at Things Fall Apart through a Marxist lens, social maneuverability and initial optimism towards social and economic increase is a path in which leads to anxiety and despair. Thank you very much.